Rob Hagans, thanks for being with me today.
Thank you.
So great to hear
Happy
from
to
you.
be here.
Thanks a lot, man. Baltimore, Maryland. Is that correct?
Well, actually, Frederick, but very close to Baltimore, Maryland, about 45 minutes from.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Um, but yeah, um, born and raised in Baltimore, but living in sort of Frederick as my adopted city.
Beautiful.
Uh,
Rob, you've just written and directed Barbara, which we think is, we've been led to believe is the first feature-length film to be written and directed on a smartphone. On an iPhone 11. Is that right?
yes, on the iPhone 11. Yeah. As far as I know, I am the first to jump on that horse.
Yeah, nice one.
And I'm glad to be to have that honor. It's nice to have this world as big as this one to sort of have like a first in any space. It's kind of
Absolutely.
cool.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's important. The field that we're in, uh, distinctions matter. I don't know if you'd agree with
Hmm.
that. Um,
Yeah,
s-
exactly.
yeah, so just to be able to be at the forefront of a pioneering method of filmmaking, I think is really important. So hats off to you for jumping ahead and doing that one. When we spoke in the lead up to this conversation, you said to me, Steven Soderbergh is your spiritual animal.
Yeah, he very much is.
Let's talk about it.
Soderbergh. I mean, you can't ask for, I think, a better filmography. Like if you look at his the things that he's done, his body of work. I mean, he's got tiny little things like the Girlfriend Experience and Bubble. I'm a big fan of the Girlfriend Experience myself.
Mm.
And then you have like giant movies like um, the Ocean's movies, and then you have sort of things that are in between, like um, Haywire, which you can see is like a mid-budget, those sort of things. And he's done, I sort of consider him to be sort of the grandfather of today's modern independent movement. Because if you look at Sex Lies and Videotape, it's kind of like the sort of blueprint for most modern like indie films, like that one or two room or like three location kind of setup
Mm.
with like four main characters. Like before Rodriguez, sort of set up the model for the $7,000 movie, there was Soderbergh sort of going, this is a move, this is a sort of a tiny blueprint as to how you can make something that's interesting without making it necessarily small, intimate, not small.
Yeah, right, right. It's interesting parallel between you and Soderbergh. So, I mean, I wouldn't say that you're starting off your career, but maybe Soderbergh has had more bites of the cherries through happenstance.
That's true. I mean, Soderbergh wasn't necessarily starting his career when he started either. He was a very successful music video director, and he was sort of in the business, but um, he hadn't really made a feature. He'd made like a bunch of shorts and different things, and he wasn't at the beginning of his career, but he certainly came in. And then, but if you look at his first few features after Sex Lies and Videotape, you can definitely see him sort of figuring out like, where do I fit? Like, what kind of movies do I want to do? I
Mm.
feel that I've sort of in that same space where it's like um, trying to figure out like the kind of movies that I want to do, the kind of movies that necessarily people expect from me, and just kind of where I fit sort of cinematically.
Yeah,
Um, I feel like my second movie, Around the World, and Barbara are kind of like cousins.
sure.
They see each other at Thanksgiving, and they don't really like each other much,
Yeah,
but
right. Yeah,
they're
yeah,
in the same family.
yeah.
But my first movie is I don't know. I don't know. I don't have a lot of positive things to say about my first movie.
Why not?
Well, I'm grateful for the experience, but I think I was when I look back on She's in the Details, and I said this to my wife more than a few times. I don't see myself in it like I see myself in these other two movies.
Hmm.
I see someone who is very green, and doesn't really doesn't really have a command of his craft yet. And I had a sort of a lot of knowledge of what I was doing and stuff like that. I mean, even at that point, but it's very much a person who doesn't understand cinematography, doesn't understand. I think the biggest lesson that I didn't understand was camera language.
Okay.
The language, there's like, when I look at around the world, when I look at Barbara, I can see what there's a message in the cinematography. There's a camera language that I'm able to speak, in which I appear to be getting fluent in. If I'm not, well, I'm getting fluent in it.
Yeah,
anyway.
sure.
I'm learning all the time. But
Yeah.
in shooting the details, that you can tell someone who is just, it's like someone who goes to a foreign country and just like has like one of those pocket dictionaries.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. But that's because you're a writer first. Isn't that true?
Mm-hmm.
So
Very much so.
Right. Okay. So you're writing. So I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but you'd be comfortable in the story that you want to tell, and it's just the translation of that into.
Yeah. I've sort of grown into directing.
Right.
I still would. I love, as much as I love it, I think I would give it up.
Right.
Not necessarily, but like depending on the project.
Yeah.
I feel I'm sort of the opposite of Soderbergh that way, where Soderbergh is like, I will give up the writing.
Yeah.
Whereas me, I would give up the director. If,
Yeah.
If I matched up with, like a Fincher or somebody like that, or somebody who's got a strong visual style.
Yeah. But that's
absolutely give it up.
Well, man, I hear, and that's because Soderbergh is a cinematographer first and foremost. So he's coming into the craft visually, and I would say you and myself, if I was going to bring myself into this comparison, which I'm not entitled to do, but coming at it from, we need to get to this point. We need to tell this story first and foremost, and I feel like the language of cinema now, especially your examples of shooting on a phone. The generation of kids growing up on movies now don't have the same cinematic language that we grew up on. What do you reckon about that?
No, I don't. Well, I think we all, to a certain extent, speak a certain level of cinematic language. How much we're able to put that into practice is where we understand, but I don't know if we can speak. You know what I mean? It's like being able to speak a language, but not being able to write it down.
Okay.
But I think the technology of the generation coming up is sort of brings them into a space where they're not necessarily, they don't have the same mindset. I feel like in terms of when I think you and I are of similar vintages, as Alex Ferrari would say.
Yeah.
But when we were coming up, the idea of shooting for post was a dirty word. Like I remember this very clearly.
Right.
Where people used to call George Lucas even a post-production director, and that was like a slur. That was a slight against him.
Right.
They were like, yeah, you get it all for post. And a lot of us most of us were shooting for the image, and then you could manipulate it later.
Yeah.
Enhance it. But this idea now, the mindset that is sort of there, in terms of the way technology works, is a lot of people are shooting for the edit. And I just don't know if I cotton to that. I don't know that I think I'm just too old for that. It's not something that I want to do, which is one of the reasons why I like shooting on the phone, because the phone sort of harkens back to those kind of cameras that I grew up working with, where you can get a specific look. I can think of the ending scene from Barbara has an amazing look to it, and then I started color correcting on it, and then it was already in a good place, but then I made it better. Cool. And I sort of released that picture yesterday, and that's what I was going for. Like I was like, this already looks good.
Yeah.
Now I can mess with it. Where it was, I feel like most modern cameras your Sonys, your Black Magics. They're aiming for a place where you can get this sort of hazy image, most of it done in log and things like that, and
Right.
then you're supposed to manipulate it in post. And I feel like that's sort of the biggest difference between this sort of generation and what came before.
I would agree. I think removing the steps to get to the end result is definitely what kids of the generation to come are gonna expect out of their filmmaking.
Right.
Your film Barbara, you just said, we had a chat before we went live. Had a cast and crew screening recently.
Mm-hmm.
How did it go?
Yes. It went great. People laughed in all the right
That's the
places,
main point.
and I sort of bust off in my own world on that. I was excited to get it finished, but I really was excited for the cast and crew to see it. It was very much a wet print,
Yeah.
where I finished it literally about 45 minutes before we were supposed to go live,
Love it.
and I spent the last 6 days or last 7 days just putting most of it together, because I released sort of a short film right in the middle of Barbara Mania, and we were trying to get everything done and trying to make sure that it was actually going to be something that we would want to show. And my wife and I, who's my producer, were not entirely sure how it was going to play.
Right.
Like, we looked at certain scenes, and one of the big scenes in the movie we shot sort of wild. We had 6 actors and not a lot of time to shoot it, and it was kind of a continuity nightmare.
Right.
And it was the last day of shooting, and we were down. We were short our lone production assistant, my nephew Lance, and so when we were coming into it, there was literally a point, I think midway through the edit of that, where I was not sure that it was going to be something that I could cut together.
Yeah.
But it did, and then seeing it up on the big screen, I was worried about quality, even though we did shoot 4K, and I sort of dumbed it down in the print to 1080, but even still, it looks pretty decent for not for a film shot on a phone, but
Sure.
for a rough cut.
Yeah.
I think personally, when I finish it, when I release it, I feel like a lot of people are going to accuse me of not shooting on a phone. And
Nice
I'm
one.
sort of,
Nice one.
I'm waiting for that.
Yeah, good.
Like,
So that's what
there's
you.
no way you shot this on a phone for $1,000. There's no way you did this.
Yeah.
You're a liar.
It's great.
So I feel like I'm gonna be spending a lot of time to sort of defending myself and sort of, which is why we've got sort of a post Barbara series on my channel, detailing it out to the dollar, like how we did it,
Very
and
clever.
how other people can.
That's really important. I mean, I remember reading a story. I think it was Edward Burns's. He wrote an autobiography recently, and I might be incorrect here, but I read somewhere that he said the story of your movie is just as important as the movie itself.
I believe so, because if you look at, like, there are certain movies, like if you look at Mariachi, as much as I am a diehard Rodriguez fan, like, I think he's the patron saint of indie film,
Yeah.
absolutely, without question. But the narrative of Mariachi is much more important than the actual film Mariachi. The film Mariachi is not that great.
It's a rough
If
film.
you think of Kevin Smith, same thing. Clerks, as much as I love that film, and I'll definitely watch it, I think more than any of the other sort of like debuts and with their own narrative and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I think it's funny, but it's got some really bad acting in it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not the best film, but the narrative behind it is important.
Yeah.
And it spawned a universe that exists to this day.
Yeah.
I think you cannot discount that. And Ed Burns, same thing. When he made that film for $10,000 on camera equipment that he just bought for at B&H in New York, like it was a big deal. There's that narrative is extremely important, and
Totally.
I feel like a lot of people are latching on to Barbara because of $1,000 film. Made on a phone, the first one to be made on the iPhone 11 Pro, like that narrative is bringing folks in to sort of see what I want to, like, people want to know what that looks like. And
Absolutely,
so
absolutely.
I'm trying to make sure that, because you go into film forums, I'm sure you've seen like film forums and groups and stuff like that where people will say, oh, so and so didn't make that movie for that amount, or those circumstances.
I never see that. I just, if somebody, like, if you're going to go to the effort of saying, I've done this for this amount of money, I believe it. Like, why would I not believe that? You know what I mean? Like,
I don't know. There's a lot of haters out there.
Yeah,
like,
whatever.
I never understand the way things are. That's that whole thing of, things get popular and then, whatever. I remember when Jordan Peele's script for Get Out got nominated for an Oscar. Everybody in the world was talking about how great that movie was, and then when it got nominated, people were like, "Well, it wasn't that great."
Oh, right.
And I was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. It's either good or it's not good. Rob, I'm probably jumping ahead here because I wanted to get to it later, but you just threw me into a question where I wanted to ask you about societal expectations. This is a direct quote from you, from a podcast you recently were interviewed on. Well, you've just given us an example of a societal expectation. Jordan Peele's film is great. Everybody accepted it, universal acclaim, until it gets a certain level of acclaim. And then it's like, let's pull back the horses here. That's not what we were talking about. We were saying...
Right, it's not that good.
It's not that worthy. Tell us about your experience, and because I know it's a driving factor in your work also. Societal expectations.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know that people see filmmaker like, it's been sort of like that my whole life, or a writer. One of those things where people just don't expect that out of me. I don't necessarily understand why, but it's one of those things where I've been sort of fighting against that my entire life. And people are all still to this day like asking to be like, "Whoa, okay, you do that? Like that's what you do?" Like, and I don't necessarily. I'm not trying to play against societal expectations of me, but I definitely feel like there's a place. And I had my short that I have on my channel, BBD, is very much about that. Where it was, people expect a certain thing from 6'4" large black male, and then when they hear the way I talk or see me there or find out what I'm into, there's immediately like they're taken aback, like, oh wow, I didn't expect you to be this person, or I didn't expect you to be someone who is educated or well-read or something like that. I don't know if that's necessarily like racism or whatever. It's just the way that sort of things play with society. We're just conditioned to expect certain things.
Sure.
And my movies, I think, reflect that in that I'm always playing with characters that sort of live on the fringes.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, sorry to cut you off, Rob, but you've used that experience and subverted it and used it as a narrative trope, haven't you? Like you used for characters that you want to reveal. You're using societal expectations in your actual films. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think my whole second movie is very much about that. Is very much about turning that kind of situation on its head. And I remember a lot of people reading, like, or in the middle of reading or watching around the world, they're sort of getting that same sort of experience where they're just like, I don't know if I'm gonna like this.
Yeah.
I remember I had these people review it for another podcast called the Touch of Flavor podcast. They're friends of mine, and I asked them to watch the film, and they were not on board all the way up until the last 5 minutes, where you sort of turn the situation on its head. And people always sort of like, oh wow, like that ending is just that sort of turnaround.
Sure. And
I feel like that's very much an internal thing where I don't like for people to put things in a box, especially me. But like, there are definite layers to people, and you never know what folks are into.
Sure.
Like, you can't necessarily put everyone in a box as much as you might like to, or um, despite what their narrative might be, or where they're coming from, or what their politics are.
Yeah.
Like, they're still human beings, and human beings are literally made of contradictions. And I feel like um, I spend my whole like I spend a lot of my time trying to do sort of the same thing with my writing, where I don't want people necessarily to come at that. I think a lot of that I spent time with that in Barbara too, where I had this character who's sort of a monster, but there's a scene at the end where I definitely, if not try to redeem her, but then to sort of give sympathy for the devil.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a factor within my work. It's definitely one of my sort of.
I think that's
works.
awesome. I like the way you've channeled it. So, you made this film for $1,000. This is Barbara that we're talking about. It's going to be released in the next couple of weeks. Well, the next couple of days. Isn't that true? We're going to go New Year's Eve?
New Year's Day is
New Year's
going
Day.
up.
Nice one.
From hell or high water.
Here we go. Before we get to, information about where we can watch it, because I'm dying to see it myself, distribution as an independent filmmaker is a pretty important conversation. How are you releasing Barbara, and are you happy with the way you're releasing Barbara? Like we've talked about your marketing approach, but the release itself. Are you happy with the way filmmaking now, independent filmmaking now, exists in this model where we have to compete with trillions of dollars and limited screens?
Well, I mean, I think it's sort of that double-edged sword. In terms of Barbara, the way we're releasing it, a lot of people have been saying, like, as they see things, they were like, well, why don't you really consider, like, traditional distribution? And for me, just sort of the way that I sort of experience media, I sort of am in touch with the way people want to experience their stuff. They want it the way they want it, and they want to get it as free as possible, because people out there don't have a lot of money. And so for me, at least for this one, I was doing it as an education tool,
Okay.
but I was also trying to make art at the same time, which is just me double dipping. But so I'm not upset that we're releasing it to YouTube. That was the plan all along, and it was never in this space where I was just like, it's disappointing. I think the next thing that I have to tackle as in sort of the series, I think that's going to be my goal as a filmmaker of 2020, is to sort of to move in that direction of what is sort of the best distribution arm, or what is the best way to release something that you do plan to try and make some sort of not necessarily a profit, but definitely some sort of money off of.
Right.
Like, what is that journey? And I think that's what I'm looking forward to in 2020. If it's sort of project unspecific, but in this for Barbara. One of the reasons that I made it for $1,000 was that it's not something where, you spent a bunch of money on it and then afterwards you put it up on YouTube and that's just money lost. I think $1,000 is a place where anyone can sort of dip their feet into that water and then not come away scarred.
Absolutely.
And that's just, I'll feel good about being able to get that out to the widest audience possible for free. And I'm glad to give it away. But I think, to answer your broader question in terms of distribution and sort of this day and age, I don't know. There's a lot of hungry consumers out there. I think for a while it's going to be very much a Wild West in terms of what is the way to release things, because you have different avenues like Patreon, and a lot of folks that I know are starting to dip their toes into that waters where they are releasing deliberately to an audience. And I feel like we're in a great place, sort of, in that there's a lot of niche audiences out there where you can sort of carve out your own space. I feel like you still can. And as long as you're consistent with your content and your audience, you can very much find a self-sustaining sort of business model that you can adhere to. But at the same time, you are competing with a lot of voices. So,
well, that leads me to my next question, man. Do you reckon you were born in the wrong era? And the reason I asked that, I've got to preface, right, that we were talking about our heroes, okay? Steven Soderbergh, Kevin Smith, Edward Burns. These are filmmakers who took, similar situations to us where they had limited resources, but they had manpower to sort of, get their limited resources and construct something. And this was in a time and a place in the mid-90s when people like Harvey Weinstein or someone would snatch these things up because you could put them on a screen in,
right.
off Broadway, and people would go and watch it. This is before everybody had subscriptions to Showtime and all sorts of the streaming platforms. Obviously, we know that those models have gone away. Filmmaking has become much more ubiquitous. So has the distribution platforms. Are we in the wrong era now where we're telling these stories that have broad form appeal, yet the audience is so forked, as in FORKED, that they're not around. You know what I mean? Like they're dispersed too far. How do we find these people?
Well, I think for me, I think I don't know that I would necessarily. I have sort of a bias because I sort of was coming up in that sort of the cowboy days of video.
Me too. Yeah.
And there were so many. I feel like people are like gatekeepers are a thing today. I feel like there's so many more gatekeepers back then because at that point you couldn't even film was the inherent standard. There was no getting around film.
Yeah.
They wouldn't even let you into film festivals if you were shooting on anything other than film. And the idea of doing things the way that people do now, like we've seen a bunch of folks, like the guy who did Lights Out and other folks like that who are coming up. They're able to make these shorts online, these viral shorts,
sure,
and come into the system, or become or sort of carve out their own audience. Not just folks who are doing it, but also YouTube personalities.
Yeah. And
I don't know that I don't think that we came up in the wrong era because I feel like I'm more geared towards today's technology and definitely today's sort of mindset with being able to make a movie for $1,000. Like even like the narrative at Rodriguez's point was $7. And what's this? I don't. You can go even further and say what's $7,000 in today's money. But
sure,
the fact of the matter is that I enjoy that you can take a piece of consumer equipment that goes in your pocket that you use to call your grandmother, on holidays, and you can take that thing and make something that stands up to red footage. I enjoy that immensely.
Cool.
The more that becomes of a thing, the happier I am about it, because now I have ways around gatekeepers. You can't stop me from making a movie. You can't stop me from distributing a movie. You can't stop me from making the next Star Wars. You can't. You cannot stop me. I am unstoppable now because of something that I keep in my pocket. And while no one has necessarily done that yet, but that's not to say that it can't be done.
Yeah.
And I very much enjoyed that freedom to be able to make the kind of content, as much as we all hate the word content, but make the kind of content that I enjoy and stuff like that, and not necessarily worry about what's commercially friendly or that sort of thing, or be able to make a movie for $1,000 that has a kind of quality that could be released, but has to worry about making so much money back.
Yeah.
There can be a calling card. There can be something that's educational. There can be a rallying cry.
Yeah.
Art as a rallying cry, and not being able to having to necessarily kill yourself financially, trying to make back, even $7,000 or $20,000, $50,000, the kind of model. Because it used to be you couldn't even step into a film festival without a film that was made for any less than $150,000 to $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
But those days are done, and
Yeah.
I'm glad they're gone, and good riddance.
Yeah,
To them.
fair call, man. Um, just going back towards your chasing of a cinematic image that's on par with a Red or something like a what was it, the other cameras, the Alexa or something like that. You're putting your iPhone 11 footage up against those on a side by side platform. And that's exciting. It builds a great narrative for your story to tell, like as you said, the story of Barbara. With the mobile phone technology being around and accessible to everyone, and the rise of everyday occurrences appearing on YouTube that have been shot on people's phones, how important do you think you will be in chasing the image in about 5 to 10 years? Like if you could tell a story that was in 4:3 or shot, whatever this is called, that.
Yeah, sort of that Instagram aspect ratio.
This is how people are using their cameras, right? So, so at the moment, your film is on comparison with high grade technology. There's a lot of videos at the moment because I'm studying law here in Sydney, right? And I'm addicted to these videos. There's 1,000 of them a day where people film their interactions with the police at roadside stops, and you go down this rabbit hole, and you just keep going. It's incredible viewing, right? And I'm thinking to myself, this is how kids are consuming content. They're not looking at Scorsese the way we did and thinking, well, how do I recreate that image on my phone? Potentially in 5 to 10 years from now, they'll be like, I know how to tell a film. I just point and click. Is this? Right. Do you see your own work going in this direction? I mean, you've already got the tools.
It already has. I'm glad you brought this up because we very much, we sort of wanted to play up the narrative of the film with Barbara in that when I considered the cinematography for this movie, I very much considered it for Instagram. And we shot a lot of one-shots and we shot a lot of coverage where you're fitting all of the characters within the frame and stacking them in layers. And we shot a lot of our sort of camera mindset was if Wes Anderson made a film for Instagram. And so we literally shot Barbara like that. And so it's already there in terms of, whether or not we're shooting for those platforms. And I don't know. I would hate to think that, eventually all films will get to that point where we're all sort of shooting for that vertical aspect ratio or shooting this way instead of this way.
Sure.
But at the same time, you can't be afraid of the future, and you can't stop technology.
Sure.
Technology is going to advance, and kids are going to experience things the way they experience them, and then they have their own flavors. And it's just like the previous generation being all precious about film versus digital.
Yeah.
Where Red is a thing now, but as it was coming out, it's very much a disruptor.
Totally.
And that idea that those gatekeepers who were saying so many different things. I literally had this the other day where someone saw the Barbara trailer and accused me and said with a stunning amount of racism that Spike Lee would never shoot anything digitally, as if Spike Lee A was a monolith for black filmmakers, and B as if Spike Lee as a young filmmaker in 2019 wouldn't shoot digitally. He absolutely would.
Of course.
No one is clamoring to shoot to shoot film in 2019 coming up. Like, you don't see a lot of these younger kids going, geez, you know what, I'd love to shoot a 16 millimeter. They don't. They have their phones, they want to shoot.
Absolutely.
And they want to be a part of the narrative. Like that. So for me, I don't necessarily agree with it. I can see it going to that sort of space, especially for a lot of the way content is consumed, because you have Instagram influencers and YouTube influencers, and there's a lot of things being shot for YouTube, and that idea of being precious about it, like that you can dictate the way people consume their media, that's the way of the dinosaur. That's
Yeah.
the way to obsolescence. And so for me, it's already affecting my work, and I think it will continue to affect my work in the future. But there's still no, like, people are still going to the movies and enjoying cinema the way, quote unquote, cinema is supposed to be. I'm looking forward to see Star Wars 9 just like everybody else. And there are certain movies, like when they re-released The Breakfast Club, at the Alamo Drafthouse, I'll go to see it. Like, I like to go to the movies. I think people will always like to go to the movies as a communal experience.
Yeah.
But in terms of content that is consumed at a very rapid pace,
there's nothing you can do.
It's going to, create a film.
It sucks, but there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, can't stand in the way of that.
Yeah, but the flip side is, because you're a writer first and foremost, it's bringing that aspect of your work to the forefront. You got to, you're concentrating more on the story rather than shot chasing, for example, potentially, right. Which is, I guess, is a benefit. Why do you love?
I do have certain standards of quality.
Yes, this is why I'm asking you. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't feel like, because there is I do want to be able to, for my footage, despite whatever it looks like, to be able to stand toe to toe with some of the larger sensor cameras and things like that, because there's no excuse, even in telling where story is more important necessarily than the image. I still have certain quality standards. That's just a part of me.
Yeah, fair enough.
I just can't. I don't think I want to get to a place where I would sort of have those lax standards and stuff like that in terms of, well, we just shot it. I mean, the story was more important, and no, I don't think I'll ever get there.
That's fair enough, but I reckon the kids are going to think the complete opposite. Because they've got a diet of, like you were saying, a diet of Instagram, rather than a diet of Reservoir Dogs,
Yeah, they don't care. They a lot of video to the younger generation come up as just content. My sons,
that's right,
who are teenagers, they're constantly talking to me about that. My son literally said to me last week, he was just like, "Don't worry about it being so pretty," and I was thinking, are we talking about the same kind of things? Like, he's talking about my Mofo Monday videos. I'm like, we shoot those with 2 lights, one of which is broken, and in a basement.
Yeah.
I don't know what you mean by pretty. What are you talking about? It's certain. He's like, it's too perfect.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't.
Because that's
what we're talking about.
Your filmmaker's coming out even in your cheapo smash grab videos. The filmmaker in you is the instinctive, and this generation now is just like just shoot and go.
Right.
It's interesting times. Why do you love Closer? Mike Nichols' Closer. Why do you love it so much?
Oh my God, where to start? The dialogue, the cinematography, the acting. Number one, the acting. Like, that scene. There's certain everything about that movie. I think it's virtually perfect. But like, if you think about a scene like the first scene between Jude Law and Julia Roberts, and they're just existing in that space, and they're just tossing dialogue at each other. And Julia Roberts is just casually snapping photos of Jude Law, and the two of them are so authentic. Like, Julia Roberts, I don't know if she's a photographer, but she looks like she's been shooting for years. She looks like that is her job. And Jude Law is existing in the skin of that character. He has bad posture, and he is sort of an asshole, and he has commitment issues, and just everything about that scene is amazing. And it's just two people talking.
Yeah.
And it's just human beings existing, like I said, full of contradictions, and I love it.
Lightning in a bottle.
I could not love it anymore. I love the pacing of the dialogue. I love the cinematography is just the way that it just allows the character to exist within their space. I rewatch that movie several times a year, and
interesting.
And I think it represents a mile of film, and I love the fact that it's underrated. I also love Mike Nichols as a director.
Oh yeah, for sure.
The Graduate, also one of my favorite films.
Great movie.
And if you want to talk about what filmmaking is, what cinema is, like, start with that movie, and you could teach a class on it.
That's
It's just
interesting.
everything from the top down about it is just so good.
Yeah.
And
Well, I can see how it influences your work, Rob, because if you think about the scene you were just describing, Julie Roberts and Jude Law, and it's two people in a room captured. It's essentially, it's lightning in a bottle. Like, that's cinema. You know, there's no special effects. It's just, you know, well lit, well discussed, well framed, and then, but you know, it's people using their craft on the stage, on the floor, and getting that in the camera. And obviously that's influencing your work because you're making talkies, you're making you know, dialogue driven films. So how important you know, like, so is rehearsal important? Like, how do you stage your shots? I mean, I know you shot very effectively for Barbara, but how important is this rehearsal process, or do you like the spontaneity? What's your process?
I do love. I don't necessarily always get rehearsal time.
Sure.
I remember on Around the World, we got a little bit of rehearsal via Skype, and that helped a lot. And the two actors were able to rehearse with each other because they were both in Los Angeles,
Cool.
across the country, before they both flew over. And so that was really helpful because they came to me off book, and then it was just about blocking, and we were able to create within the space. Barbara, for me, especially certain sequences, I'm very much about rehearsal on set, but I also don't like to rehearse it out, because you will find, like, the raw energy of like beginning performances, and sometimes you get that lightning in a bottle things where you just get it, you just snatch it on a first take. There's a lot of one take only shots in Barbara where we just, like, nailed it that first take, and I was just like, okay, move on. Nope. And certain actors, you know, don't, you know, like that. They're just like, really, you don't want to do another one? And some actors are like, I love it. Let's do it. Let's go. Let's move on.
Sure.
Like, I got it. Good.
Yeah.
And you sort of have to navigate as a director, like, who's, depending on what you have time for, what your production schedule allows for. You know, you might want to do that second take just to sort of, or a third take just to sort of give folks that chance to feel like they were able to get what they wanted out. But for me, I sort of ride that line between, like, sort of what would be like almost like a mumblecore-esque kind of.
Yeah, I didn't want to say it, but yeah, that's.
Yeah, like a mumblecore-esque kind of place, and also from a rehearsed kind of space. It's just, and that's just, I think, the nature of, not necessarily convenience, but of necessity, of having 6 days to shoot an 89-page film.
That's right.
And you can do rehearsals during sound checks. You try to combine those things and stuff like that. But I would love to be able to rehearse things down to, like, let's say, a Sorkin kind of level of rehearsal, where you can, you know, they did a bunch of rehearsal on Steve Jobs. I remember, like, it was like a play.
Sure.
But that's not always in the budget.
Indie filmmaking. No. That's right.
You got to make do with what you got.
That's right. Rob, tell us about Barbara. When's it getting released, and how can we watch it?
Well, I have a YouTube channel, Bespectacled Mofo.
Bespectacled Mofo.
Yeah, it's on the
There
hat.
it is on the hat, and I'll put a link in the description as well.
Yeah, it's my YouTube channel. I will be sort of, my year-long journey sort of ends in March. We sort of started this journey about $1,000 feature film, but it will be there New Year's Day.
Beautiful.
So whether you're subscribed or not, but I hope you subscribe. It'll be sometime New Year's Day. It'll be there New Year's Day. I'll put it that way.
Sure.
We are, I think, about 70% through it, and in terms of production quality, towards the end, we're just finishing up the sound, and we're finishing up color correction, and we're sort of picture locked.
Beautiful.
Which is great. But it'll be there, and we may, I don't know, I've been considering doing a kind of release for Instagram, because the actors have been asking me, because there are a lot of younger actors. I'm 36, 37 next month.
Right.
And so, for me, I'm like, YouTube, yay, and, Vimeo.
Yeah.
But, some of the actors have been asking, like, well, what are we going to do about Instagram? Because it's very important to them, and that's where they sort of exist, way more than necessarily Facebook. But, yeah, so I'm maybe considering something for that. And
what would that look like? Would you split it up into sections? What would you do?
Maybe it might be do something where you set it up into something where being that it's a 70-minute film, you could put it up into like 7-10-minute segments.
Sure.
Or 10 7-minute segments.
Yeah.
So you could probably do it that way, and put it up on IGTV, that sort of thing, and that might be something that we could look into. And I think it'll play because, like I said, the cinematography plays towards that aspect ratio. And also, we also use one of the Instagram filters. There was in our color correction, we were thinking about that, and so I Googled to see whether or not somebody had released a LUT pack with the Instagram filters, and we chose Ginza, and so we've been sort of color correcting with that. So it will look like it belongs. Love
it, fantastic, yeah, great.
So it'll definitely be on YouTube, and it may also have a life on Instagram as well.
Right.
I'd be interested in the experiment.
Well, listen, you'll definitely get a view. You'll definitely get a view out of me. I'm 35. I'm in the same vintage of you, so I'm a YouTube man, and one of those view counts will be mine. Really looking forward to it, Rob. Congratulations on all the work you've done. And
thank you, sir.
No, thank you. Thanks for your time. I'm taking you away from your vital post-production time, but you're the most optimistic filmmaker I think I've ever come across, Rob, and it's infectious. Thank you.
I would just want to say, because we sort of connected via your site, and I love your blog, and
thanks, man.
I definitely love your podcast, and so I very much love the way that you're sort of championing the power of independent film as well as mobile film. And I really enjoy that because I feel like we should be empowering more people to go out and create and to tell stories. Because I feel like, especially with the way things are in terms of not just the economy of the United States, but also the world economy, I feel like art is more important than ever. And a lot of people just come home and they may have stories inside them, but they think, oh, I can't do that. I'm not that person. And being able to empower someone by saying, no, it's okay. You don't need fancy cameras. Like Panasonic released, and Netflix released, has that list of cameras that are Netflix appropriate.
Oh, what a joke. Yeah. I've read it.
It was a big deal because in the video world, because Panasonic made all that noise because they released the S1H. Right. And they were like, this is a Netflix appropriate camera. As long as you use these settings and blah, blah, blah. And for me, that was kind of like, are you kidding?
It's bullshit. Total bullshit. Right. Yeah.
It's total crap.
Yeah.
And not only that, but the opening price of that camera, not that, whatever, Panasonic, price your camera wherever you want. I don't care.
Sure.
But at the same time, that camera is priced at $4,000. So you mean to tell me, so even to get into what you're saying is possibly to get into Netflix's good graces, it's a $4,000 asking price at the beginning.
I know.
To get into anything else, $4,000.
But Rob, your hero gets in on an iPhone 11 or an iPhone 10.
Right, exactly. So that's sort of my point, because we let Soderbergh in with a phone, not even an iPhone 10. He only did it with an iPhone 8.
Yeah. So they're full of it, mate. They're full of it. They're totally full of it. But that's interesting, Rob. I was going to say, I think you're 100% right. I think art is important, and it's a bit of a wank to say that, right? Oh, art, But if you look at the current state of the world, getting a little bit geopolitical here, the way to counter divisions is to create things that people can enjoy, I think.
Right. If you're enjoying the same like, you know, if we're enjoying the same kind of content, there's at least a space
I
where we
agree.
are both fans of these things. We
Yeah,
have the same sort of references that condense into what is this piece of art.
100%.
And so if you can meet on that, then you can find ways to get over the other stuff,
Exactly.
because here is this place where we connect, where we enjoy something,
Mm.
and we can find common ground or friendship
Yeah.
in that goes beyond everything else. We might be polar opposites and stuff like that. My best friend and I are very similar politically, but in terms of our ideologies, you know, we're sort of come at things in a very different way. But
Mm.
at the same time, we very much geek out over Mr. Robot all the time.
Good. Yeah,
Um, yeah,
100%. Yeah, and that's look, when I see if I see a film getting released and it's like a Star Wars and it's taken $1 trillion or something like that, I don't look at that and go, oh great, someone's putting their foot on our neck and squeezing us as filmmakers.
right. It's not competing for the same space.
Yeah, I'd be like, great, that's people enjoying 2 hours and they're not on the internet ripping each other apart for 2 hours. So that's great.
Right, exactly.
You know what I mean?
I'm very much. I'm very much about making sure that in this time, I feel like in the sort of dark time of at least economics,
Yeah.
that I think art is more important than ever.
Yeah.
Not just the consummation of it, but definitely the creation of it, and to feel like that everyone is able of creating a piece of art that they can be proud of, and that other people can enjoy. I feel like that's probably the best thing about technology, is that we're in this space where some nobody like me can make $1,000 movie and then put it out there, and folks go, wow, that's really interesting. I love that story. I feel like I know a Barbara. I feel like I am this character. This is me and my wife, you know, that sort of thing. And to be able to do that, to be able to connect with people on that level, that's everything in the world to me. That's I feel like that's how you save the world.
Mate, saving the world one film at a time. Rob Hagans, thank you very much.
Hopefully.
Oh, mate, you're doing it. I love your work. Thank you for your time, Rob.
Thank you for having me.
Legend.